welcome on a journey with me and African Spatial Studio. Let's continue with what spatial design is. On the previous video, we have dived in a little bit deeper on Henry Lefebvre, Doreen Massey, and Edward Soja. These thinkers have helped us understand spatial field a bit and how space has effect on us. In this video, we'll dive in a little bit into Nigel Cross, Bill Hillier, and Jane Rendell and understand how they view space and how spatial design has shaped lives or how it's continuing to shape lives. Nigel Cross is a design scholar who introduced us to the idea that design is not just something we do. It's also a unique way of thinking and knowing. In his book Design the Way of Thinking, he argues that design thinking deserves to stand alongside science and the humanities as distinctive mode of inquiry. What does he mean by that? It means that designers think differently. They don't just use logic like scientists or narrative like historians, but instead they rely on visual thinking, intuition, sketching, modeling, prototype, iterative trials, and errors. In short, he is telling us designers don't just solve problems, they frame them in a unique way, often creating exploration rather than fixed formula. According to Cross, design has its own epistemology, meaning its own way of understanding and generating knowledge. Here's what he means by that. He's framing the problem as over problem solving. Designers often redefine the problem while working on it. It is very experiential, mainly through visual cues that have been observed and some of the precedent projects or even precedent event. So we would you would ask yourself, why is this very important? Why is this theory, or why is this person who's brought this information brought forward, why is it so important? If you're working in landscape architecture, in urban design and planning, or other spatial design field, cross theory validates what you already do, and it gives language to it. It helps us defend design as a discipline of knowing, not just artistic flair, teaching design thinking with more structure and clarity. It encourages students and professionals to trust the design process even when solution isn't also obvious, because designing is not one way or it's not a straight line. It's more about experiencing, going back, fixing, or even trial runs and very experiential. So in South Africa, in a place where spatial planning has often been rigid, technocratic, and politically charged, designers design the way of knowing open up space for creative context specific solution that don't only rely on import models. They should be community driven design that listen, adapt, and evolve with the community or the people, and cultural spatial sensitive, because designers are trained to notice details that matters to people who's living that in the area every day. So it means policies and other framework needs to also be flexible to this and adjust a little bit to all of this that I'm mentioning. So cross help us ask question like, how can we design with intuition, empathy, and imagine not just regulations? And then how do we frame complex spatial challenges in a way that invites new possibility? How can we visualize thinking and iterative prototyping by help engage community and test alternatives? I always ask myself, what is Africanism in architecture? Can we look at our different social um, background, and find a way to structure our architecture in a way that represents us as South African? Is there a way to do that? Nigel reminds us that design thinking is its own kind of intelligence, one that blends with logic, creativity, and structure with intuition and action with reflection. In a world facing complexity and complex spatial, environment, and social challenges, this way of thinking is not just helpful; it's very essential. A British architect and a theorist best known for developing space syntax, a method of analyzing spatial layout to understand how the configuration of space affects human movement, interaction, and behavior. His work fundamentally changed how we understand the relationship between urban form and social life. Space in tech is both Space tech is both theory and set of analytical tools that help us understand how layout of building, streets, settlement influence how people move through space, where social interactions occur, patterns of accessibility and exclusions, and more, even safe and surveillance. Space intakes is Space as a generator of social relation. Healer argues that space is not passive, it actively shapes human behavior. Space is not just an empty background, it's a dynamic medium that organizes social life. Now we're going back to theories of Massey in this line that I just said now. Space in syntax focus on how space are connected to each other, which is configuration, not just their sizes or use. For example, a street well connected, many paths lead into it, tends to have more people passing through, and a space that is visually integrated with others tends to feel more safe and lively. Integration and segregation in the space intakes, he's saying that integrated spaces are highly connected and encourage movement and interaction. So the opposite is segregated spaces are disconnected and tend to feel isolated and unsafe and underused. These qualities can be measured by using tools like Excel maps, segment analysis, and visual visibility graphs. And we ask, why does it matter again? Space syntax provide a way to quantify and simulate the social effects of design decision before they are built. This is very powerful because it allows for evidence-based design. It links urban forms directly to social and economic performances. It also reveals hidden bases of in design, such as layout that are unintentionally isolated or exclude communities. Syntax in South Africa. In a post-apartheid South Africa, space in text is extremely relevant for undoing spatial segregation by designing more integrated public spaces, street and housing. It also supports inclusive design in township, informal settlement, and rural areas or villages. It improves workability, access to jobs, and urban safety. Um, Hila helps us and ask questions like, how does this layout of a place include or exclude people? Can we design street and public spaces to promote interaction and safety and mobility? How do we configure apartheid era space to support spatial justice? Bill Hiller's space syntax is very powerful lens for understanding how spatial layout influence social quality, behavior, and access. For urban designers, landscape architects, planners, and other spatial design field professionals, especially in global south, it offers scientific foundation for creating more just, workable, and connected environments. An architectural theorist and historian whose work bridges architecture, art, feminism, and cultural theory. Her most well known concept, which is critical spatial practice, offers a new way of thinking about how space is produced, experienced, and challenged, particularly through interdisciplinary practice. These critical spatial practices are, at its core, a critical practical space is a form of spatial engagement that questions power, reveals social condition, and proposes alternative through creative and critical means. It goes beyond traditional design, seeing spatial work not just as a problem solving but as a question posing. It engages ethics, politics, and subjective, focusing on how and why space is made and experienced. The key features of critical spatial practice include interdisciplinary, where disciplines have a blurred lines. Practitioners might combine writing, installation, mapping, walking, and curation of to explore space critically. The second one is reflecting and political. It doesn't just design. She's saying that it doesn't just design, it reflects on the condition of design, including who has the power of space, whose voice are heard and erased, what histories and futures are imagined. The third one is situated knowledge. In this, it means critical spatial practices is grounded in ideas that knowledge is context specific and embodied. It values the lived experience of the people in that particular space. The fourth one is transformative intent. It's not just about critique. It aims to propose new possibilities and foster changes often involving collaboration with communities, practicality methods, experimental formats. And this matters. Rendell is showing that this concept matters, especially relevant for those working in diverse post-colonial or contested spaces like in South Africa, where design is not neutral and spatial inequalities has deep roots. It encourages us as designers to be critical of dominant narrative, e.g., or for example, Western planning models or colonial urban legacies. It allows us to also use creative tool to uncover hidden stories in spaces, work with people not just for them, treat design as an ongoing conversation, not just as a product. A quote from Rendell is critical spatial practices operates between theory and practice, between public and private, between art and architecture. This positioning allows freedom and flexibility to address complex issues like gender, race, class, history, and land. Topic deeply embedded in South African landscape. It is important in our South African spatial because the context of South African spatial legacy is deeply politics. Apartheid planning enforces racial, economic, and cultural division. Critical spatial practices help rethink space not just as physical but ethically and socially. This whole theory provides us with tool to expose spatial injustice, challenge dominant planning ideologies. It also helps us celebrate diversity in culture and expressions, and it empowers marginalized voices. In summary, Jane Rendell's critical spatial practice teaches us to approach space with curiosity, with responsibility and imagination. It moves design from being merely functional to becoming a tool for reflection, resistance, and reimagination. For spatial designers, for artists, for architects, and for researchers, it is a framework for working ethically and creatively in complex environment, especially where social transformation is the goal. Thank you for joining us today to explore these powerful ideas that challenges and enrich our understanding of design. We've seen how Nigel Cross, Bill Hiller, and Jane Rendell each give us a unique lens to look at the world and the world of design. Nigel Cross helped us understand that design is a unique way of thinking, a blend of logic and intuition that is essential for solving complex and messy problems. Bill Hiller provides the scientific framework showing us how physical layout of place can actively shape social life and human behavior. Jane Rendell reminds us that design is critical and political act, arguing that urging us to use our creative skill to question power, expose injustice, and imagine more equitable future. Together, these three theories give us a richer and more comprehensive toolkit for our work as spatial practitioners. They validate what we do intuitively, while also giving us analytical and ethical language to defend our discipline, create more and just environment, and tackle some of the most pressing challenges in our community. Thank you very much for your time. We hope this has inspired you to think more critically and creative about power of design. Bye. Hope to see you and for you to join us on the next video. Thank you.